2 mana on this turn to put down a bigger threat on a turn where Druid doesn't want to spend mana on removal. They want to be spending their turn 4 on overgrowth, and then your Felma / your buff Scavenger's minion is a lot more likely to stick and get multiple attacks in. And here we have all those cards mentioned.
Oi, oi, oi. So it's kind of a weird mulligan because Volpatinger you're probably just holding on to because it's good enough as a 1-drop, but it's not ideal. You know, you'd obviously like to get it off Scavenger's Annuity. I think that's a little bit better than Phase Stalker against Druid. And there are a whole bunch of 1-drops in the deck.
Yeah, it is quite tough. If you had the coin, this is a Snap Keep 2 on the left.
Yes.
But since he's on the play, I'm kind of on board with Wolpertinger, Felma, and then just look for a guaranteed turn 3.
Right, because there's some kind of anti-synergy between the Scavenger's Ingenuity and the Volpatinger in hand, because on turn 3, if you could guarantee yourself Volpatinger to go as 2 3/3s with the Ingenuity, it would be insane. But with one of them already in hand, it's likely to not happen. And now he's guaranteed the Phase Stalker.
Indeed, it is by far the better target here, although 4/5 Phase Stalker is still nothing to scoff at. Blitzchung off to a fast start, as you would always expect from this deck. But DawN's hand is not a slouch either. He has active Breath of Dreams, and although he doesn't have any immediate payoff, there's so many things he can top deck over the next 3 draws he'll get before he needs to play something after Breath of Dreams.
Yeah, this is a hand that can win 100%. Swipe a premium pickup as well. One of the real benefits of Mali Druid is just, we've kind of forgotten in the flurry of incredibly powerful Druid cards. Swipe's still just good. It clears off a lot of stuff in the early game.
For sure. Guardian Animals also picked up for DawN. Getting very scary, DawN's hand.
So we obviously can start to plan for next turn here with Ingenuity guaranteeing him Phase Stalker. How does he want to like best set up for this turn? Is it Tour Guide to get a 0-mana hero power?
So it depends on how much Blitzchung values getting a good secret in play. With 1 Freezing Trap drawn, he still has the other Freezing Trap, 1 Pack Tactics, and 1 Pressure Plate. I'd have to imagine Pressure Plate is the best one to get off of the Phase Stalker in the near future. Although Wolpertinger this turn, I kind of like the idea of, because it's just 1 more damage on board immediately. And then when you go Scavengers this turn, you can still technically just pack tactic after you draw the Phase Stalker. Turn 4, you can still just 2-drop plus hero power.
I mean, even then, I'm almost looking at the line of Scavenger's Ingenuity, Tour Guide, and then actually press the hero power, just so that you can next turn go hero power Phase Stalker again to get the maximum amount of damage through.
Okay. That is very smart. I get the thinking behind it, but because he has Freezing Trap to spend the mana on, I don't think I would go for that line. I feel like it's between Phase Stalker plus Natural Button without having used the Tour Guide and Wolpertinger instead, or this line and just get 2 secrets online next turn.
DawN here, obviously sitting here wishing that they had buffed Felmore so that it unstealthed after just 1 turn instead of 2, because it's going to be a bit of an awkward curve now, trying to fit in the swipe next turn instead.
Although the Fungal Fortunes is an interesting proposition, obviously it has significant failure rate. But if he hits a single Lightning Bloom, then the Guardian Animals is active next turn. Also Innervate, because he can just save the coin.
What about just make a tree, and half the time the Felmore attacks into that, right? Which is a massive health save.
That's true. And he just has Swipe locked up for turn 5 into coin Guardian Animals. Yeah, I think this is a lot more disciplined approach. I like it. Ooh, that boy. That's the last time I saw a Felma trade.
Ooh.
Oh, that draw.
Oh, okay, that's interesting, because at this point, that guarantees that the next draw is Dragonbane, right? So he could store the 0-mana hero power to go for it next turn instead.
That's a correct, but I think blitzchung really wanted to get the freezing trap down this turn because it's approaching guardian animals active with ramp territory. And the phase stalker is the same size as the full Celt now, so I can respect it. And the way the curve has worked out, he's still, as long as it's not, you know, Dragonbane top deck this turn. And even if it is, you still just have Dragonbane hero power by the 6th mana turn.
So obviously, swipe coin Moonfire hero power is a clear on this turn should he want to go for it. But there is the fear of pack tactics, which you do obviously have to be afraid of. So I imagine he's just going to leave the Felmore where it is and go with the Guardian next turn.
And I think the bigger deal is you save coin to be able to go for Guardian.
What you seek. Knowledge is what I provide.
Yeah, and upon seeing it play out, it's just such a clean line from blitzchung. As I was saying, there was the kind of temptation to go with get the Dragonbane last turn, but now he gets the secret in play. It messes with Guardian Animals. Dragonbane still a possibility next turn, and DawN here, I think, is not going to be all too happy how this plays out.
Indeed. And because this is Malygos Druid, there's no room to run the Lake Threshers, which would have been insane. blitzchung did not position around it because he didn't have to.
Good job.
If power is what you seek, knowledge is what I
Why does that have like a mech animation when it's a beast lore type card?
Yeah, I think it's like Ashes of Outlands thing, like kind of mechy stuff, mechanized people. That's my answer. Final answer.
Okay. Mechy stuff.
Mechy stuff.
Well, we're looking for Moonfires here.
Swipe.
Oh, he's 1 mana off.
Oh, that's brutal. Loom hero
really
power.
is.
That's awful. Yeah, you just tank it. Oh, really?
Really? I'm very surprised. Oh, hero power face just to gain 1 armor because he's committing to swipe next turn?
Was he just... He wasn't dead on board, right? Oh no, he was because he knows Dragonbane is
oh,
there.
right. Yes. Good spot, DawN.
Good spot. I haven't actually counted to see if that does keep him alive. 1 health?
Uh-huh.
Okay, fair play. Correct line, DawN.
Yeah.
You're still going to lose this game, but good job.
Yup, even if he had Moonfire here as the top deck would swipe for the full clear and innervate hero power, 1 button from blitzchung would have those things out.
Just too perfect of a curve for blitzchung. The absolute dream there with Felmore, the Scavenger's Ingenuity, Volpatinger, all the good stuff. Exactly what you want.
Yeah. And it was a small decision there between Tour Guide and Wolpertinger for immediate damage on the turn where he had 1 extra mana with the Scavenger's Ingenuity. But I think he correctly realized that Freezing Trap development can be so devastating against Druid. Had he not had that, DawN would have had 2 more draws in hand. He would have had a clear on a 5-1, and it could have been a completely different game.
Yeah, it's obviously more likely to happen when you have these very, very quick aggro hunter games. But I feel like that was one of the few times when, upon thinking back on it, I do just think blitzchung made every choice correctly that game. Like, even in the mulligan, with the curve of holding on to exactly like you were laying out, the Volpatinger and the Felmore, because the Scavenger's Ingenuity in general doesn't give you a good turn 3. It was just a very, very clean game plan, which is what we expect from blitzchung for sure. He's the OG aggro guy, and showing us here he's still got what it takes.
And still good from DawN, I think, just, you know, spotting the line to stay alive at 1 HP, even though it's very unlikely he can win the game from that spot. I think we've been seeing from several players, both at Masters Tour and in GM, not taking lines to guaranteed stay alive the next turn. Even though it's low odds to win the game from that point, you're still just supposed to do your due diligence, in my opinion.
You are indeed. It was, a good effort to try and find the miracle out. We've been seeing a little bit too much apathy in the late game from players, not even trying to play to their out here, so I do appreciate that. That pretty much marks the halfway point of our matches here today for Asia Pacific, halfway through our 3rd match of the day. We're going to go to a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to see if blitzchung can go all the way with his super clean aggro play.
もし自分のハースストーンのプレイに、スローガンをつけるとしたら、
아무래도 팔기 위해서라면은 장점을 더 부각을 해야 되니까 장점을 말씀드리면은
ハースストーンのスローガンとしては自分が楽しく勝つことをスローガンとしていきたいと思います。ちょっと歌はわからないです。
楽しさ第一かな。
잘합니다.
ハーストーンのスローガンを考えるなら、運が良ければ上手い人にも勝てる。
My slogan will be Town 60229 is the best. Okay?
제 하스스톤 슬로건 방식은 쉽고 빠르게 라고 하고 싶어요.
如果我的炉石的打法当成一个产品来卖我觉得还是不要，我觉得我会破产。
blitzchung up against DawN in our third match of the day here for APAC Grandmasters. Two players who were in Division B last season but have made their way over to Division A. But while they were there in Division B, they did have very, very different stories. blitzchung, for the most part, cleaning up pretty easily, ending up at the top or towards the top of Division B, whereas DawN was right on the brink of elimination, just scrapping at the bottom with Staz and Samuel Sao, who did end up being eliminated, and Frosty as well, of course, to try and avoid those spots. And in the end, he was just able to survive and keep his life here in Grandmasters. This season, of course, setting his sights on playoffs and world championships instead of on the relegation. And if he is going to get there, getting a win here would be a big deal to start improving his scoreline.
It's such a huge difference on your mental state, just where you are in the divisions. We saw it from Possessi, and in a strange twist of fate, I suppose Possessi is kind of where DawN was at last season,
True.
at least. Maybe it's too early to say because it is just an 0-2 score for Possessi currently. But DawN, I think every time we've seen him on screen, it's been on point so far for this season. I love to see it. I think it's been a stark improvement, and also just being in Division A will do wonders for his self-confidence.
So this is a matchup that I haven't seen actually in a little while here, at least in APAC GM, of Mali Druid up against Survival Druid. I do know that quite a while ago, when both of these decks were both starting to pop up, I do feel like the regular Survival Druid had the advantage because they can just start beating up on the Mali Druid a bit more consistently. But now obviously we've seen a nerf to Kael'thas. The deck has taken on a very different form. Do you think that still holds true here for the Survival Druid being in the lead?
Yeah, and on top of the nerf to Kael'thas, there's also the stealth buff to Omu being
True.
a small thing, but still, I would be inclined to say that Survival Druid is in the lead because of that card that blitzchung just drew, Lake Thresher. They include that in their GA package, whereas Mali Druid does not. So if it comes down to Guardian Animal Wars, then the Survival Druid is almost certainly going to win in response, with the Lake Threshers easily cleaning up the other two pieces.
At the moment, I'm thinking less Guardian Animal Wars and more just Animal Wars for these players. Both of them just drawing all their beasts without any hint of a Guardian Animals in sight. The real boon, I guess, here for DawN that's pulling him into the lead is exactly this. Ghidra plus Overgrowth with few answers in the deck for blitzchung.
This is huge. I mean, Ghidra is a card which you can argue for keeping in specifically this matchup because Druid hardly has answers to deal with 4 HP this early on, and already this Ghidra is getting right down to business. blitzchung, however, has his GA for next turn.
Right, I mean, this kind of had to happen for DawN to even be in the game, because with 2 Twilight Runners and a Teacher's Pet drawn, his draw was absolutely miserable. It's just a 5/8 Wind Fury that's even giving him a chance. And having said that, blitzchung should still be able to mop this up pretty easily.
Yeah, no matter what combination of beasts he gets off of the Guardian Animals, he can deal with the Ghidra. Of course, some are less awkward than others, and the Overload is something you have to think about for the next turn, but because he'll still have 4 mana available for the Overgrowth, I don't think there's any reason to get too greedy. You don't want to tank another 10 against a deck that is just running first in the form of Swipe.
Yeah, and it's not like next turn he'll be left without reactivity. He'll obviously have the play of Overgrowth, which will unlock on that turn the Bog Beam and the Iron Bark. So it's still, I think, a reasonable approach here for blitzchung, and should be able to pull off some decent combos.
Yeah, it's true. However, the beast that blitzchung spawned, Soddle's least favorite educated Elec, kind of disincentivizes just throwing out Iron Bark here. Not that you have a Bog Beam target to begin with, but I absolutely think he still has to Overgrowth here. I mean, if this were not exactly educated Elec, I would consider still putting down the Iron Bark on this just because how it matches up against the Twilight Runner.
Yeah, it is pretty clean. Outside of that, you're looking to have to commit Bog Beam next turn, which is, I guess it's okay. The main thing was, of course, that with Overflow in hand, you just want any opportunity you can get to dump these cards in hand. So I honestly think I probably would still have gone for the Iron Bark there, having looked at it.
DawN's turn is also extremely interesting. He has a very minion-dense hand. A couple of points of ramp would really make the start to shape up, which is why I was expecting that he would start with a Twilight Runner attack. And if he hits like an Innervate there, then suddenly you can play Ysera this turn. but he's holding back altogether, which is really interesting.
Right, so this says a couple of things, right? It kind of says Malagos because you can just go for the double attack and hope to hit Moonfire. But what I think it says to me more is Ysera. Next turn, shuffle the portals in and then draw a whole bunch of them and dominate the board.
It says so many things. It could even just be send these both base, and then blitzchung is sometimes just at 8.
Yeah.
And depending on what you draw, you can go for a big Omu turn. It's very flexible. A line that I did not think of, and I think it works out pretty well for DawN since he has HP to work with. And there's also the upside of leaving up the Elec means that blitzchung is slightly more hesitant to play any spells.
And so now we're looking at probably dumping the Ironbark and then trying to get down enough cards for overflow on this turn. Like, it's either playing the Twilight Runner or go Living Dragon Breath, Vate, Overflow here instead.
Oh man, and then you're drawing Vates off the over... Oh wait, the Elec is not dead yet, so that's not the case. I kinda like the overflow plan. He's playing Lake Pressure instead. Okay, well, this preloads a way to answer the Twilight Runners, but you have to expect that it's dying.
My dream is your nightmare.
Here we go. This was the plan all along for DawN. Let's find some dragons.
4 shots at it. Very, very likely. It's an ugly trade, but I think take the cycle. More shots at the dragons. Here we go. Whoa, Zeraku, that's a good way to start. You can Moonfire your own face.
Oh! That's probably just the play, right? You get a 6/6 for 0 mana.
Yeah? It lines up well against Thresher. I love it.
You can even search for, like, Claw here off of Nature Studies to try and get another one.
Time waits for no one.
Ah.
Probably another Vate.
Yeah,
because you have Omu.
These your own face.
I like the Soul. He's reasonably likely to stick minions. He's just winning on board.
He is. And he set this up again. You know, it's the non-attack with the Twilight Runner 2 turns ago that made this a possibility.
blitzchung's deck is full of garbage. Okay, that's not one of the garbage cards. Here we go. This is the response.
Obviously, a broomstick is what he really wanted here, but you know what? Any way to develop board whatsoever, you're not going to turn your nose up at it.
Oh, Blessing? Swipe? Wait, these are all insane.
Yeah, you probably don't want to give another 6/6 here, so I do like taking the Blessing.
I mean, there was a way if you go Bog Beam and then trade, and then you can swipe the 6/2 resulting, but you waste the discount on Nature Studies, which is why I'm surprised that we didn't see Bog Beam first.
Oi, oi, oi.
This is pretty nuts. He can even fit in Hero Power to deal with the 6/1.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me.
Oh, or Zixor.
Doesn't even
Don't even take the 6. I was gonna say, the only scary thing of face tanking 6 there is sometimes he's dead with burst from DawN on the other side. But that is a very threatening board of beasts.
However, DawN can do some pretty nutty stuff as well on his own. Obviously, Omu is available. The Guardian Animals, I believe, only gets him a Teacher's Pet at this point, so that's not ideal. You're just drawing.
I think he needs to hit swipe to make this work. So if you go Overgrowth into exactly swipe, yeah, it has to be Omu first, right?
I mean, if he wants to play it, then yeah.
To play it with Malagos, that's the whole goal.
Right,
But
Mali
doesn't
swipe.
hit anything of substance, and that's probably GG as far as I can see.
Teacher's Pet off of Guardian Animals or the actual Teacher's Pet doesn't make a difference. Soul of the Forest doesn't get there.
Just too much stat.
I concur.
if both of these taunts have more taunts inside them, does that ever... I guess he can technically survive.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much about surviving, it's more just the fact that he never wins board back. Like, this was the power turn for him, and it's so easy to deal with for blitzchung.
But he is very likely dead on board. Like, if these both don't hit taunts, he's one blessing of Ancients plus Hero Power into 4-1 away from lethal. But blitzchung's not taking the odds, because I think it's pretty much 100% if you deal with everything, because he's seen the Omu.
Yeah, he's seen Omu, he's seen one Moonfire as well. So even if it's like Malagos, Innovate, Lightning Bloom, Germination, there's still no double Moonfire to go along with that. Like, there's just no outs for lethal, I don't. Just taking the heal with Overflow. Yeah.
Yep.
Time waits for no one.
Oh, have your broom at the end for style point.
Why not? Yep, very clean turn. Everything in the right order. Everything in its place. And DawN, very likely dead.
Almost Noah's Ark-ish, you know, 2 of each beast.
Find your power.
Oh, the swipe is too late.
What is that? 6 AoE? That's a clear, right? Oh no, it's overloaded.
Yeah.
Oh.
Unfortunate. You know, if his portal had generated Malagos, maybe.
Yeah.
But it was not meant to be.
Brutal for DawN.
Not much more to be said, but it's not wrong for DawN to take some extra time and compose himself here, because you do need to make sure you are fully focused to try and pull off a reverse sweep. We saw Tiz do it against Possessi a while ago, so it's definitely not impossible, but it's going to be real rough for DawN, because blitzchung's aggressive lineup has been preying on the Druid from DawN so far.
Yeah, this is what we've been saying time and again. Like, if you thought Possessi lets his head get to him when he's in those losing states, DawN has been visibly, at least, the most susceptible player to this defeatist attitude, I think is the only way to call it. Like, as soon as he starts losing these games of Hearthstone, he's very down on himself, like physically slapping himself to try and, I guess, jerk himself awake and get back in the zone and try and buck this poor mental attitude he seems to have, because that is when the mistakes creep in. I think so far it's been pretty right on from DawN. He's been playing to his outs where possible. He's understood the matchups as far as I can say. The draws haven't quite been there, obviously, in these couple of games. But as long as he can realize, I'm in Division A, it's not the end of the world if I lose this series, I think that's when he has a chance to come back and win it.
And you have to question if Malagos Druid is the weak link. I mean, we started off the day with Surrender having a very strong showing with it, but after Possessi got swept on it, DawN has taken 2 losses on it. It's starting to look pretty shaky, especially the slightly greedier builds. And it could be maybe that people were expecting to run into more priests. I certainly was expecting more priests this week than we did see in APAC. And even not accounting for, like, the priest being in different archetypes, even if you add all the archetypes together, I think there were just 5 people that brought priest to APAC, which is a big surprise to me, and definitely not what the Mali Druid players were expecting, I'd wager.
Not what they were expecting, for sure. I mean, they've still got some decent matchups. You know, I think you're giving yourself a decent shot against the Warrior, just having a bit of extra damage to get over all that armor in the late game. But I do agree. I think the players who've gone for the survival version have got themselves a bit of a better chance coming into this week. DawN, with this match he's going for now, whether or not it's going for the random decision on which deck you queue into, as most players seem to go for, or if he's choosing each time which deck to queue, it is going to be not an easy time he's given himself here, with Tempo Mage, Mirror definitely being one of the harder matchups to play. But DawN, I think, with the style of play from the Mage and Rogue, I do think that's been the decks that I've seen the Hearthstone I respect most from him in recent months.
Indeed. Blitzchung, every time I see him on Tempo Mage, I have to call back to two specific games. One where he was playing out Mana Cyclone as a 2-mana 2/2, and the other where he was keeping Raz in the mulligan. Just very, unconventional game plans with how you play it. But when you see the logic behind it and the way that Blitzchung kind of identified that this is one of the niche situations where this type of playstyle actually wins him the matchup, it really impresses me.
Yeah, I've loved what I've seen across the board from Blitzchung on the Mage. And we're also getting to see not only two different playstyles, but the two prevailing schools of thought in terms of the build that you go for with Mage. Dragon on one side with Spellkins, and actually only one Arcane Breath from DawN. And then Blitzchung, the kind of old school, but still very often supported as the better version of the deck by a lot of the pro community, with no dragons, Conjurers Falling, you fit the Firebrands in there as well.
I feel like most of the lists I've been seeing on ladder and in bigger sample size tournaments have landed somewhere in the middle, where you're not running the dragon package, but you're also not running Firebrand, and instead going for the double Spellwings, double Wand Maker. So this version from Blitzchung is a little bit older, but I expect that the Firebrands will be quite useful in this matchup because they're a way of cleaning up the smaller minions without having to commit too many spells.
Pretty tough as to how you sequence this for DawN. It could very well just be Dalaran Mage on this turn, because then you're likely to get probably one card draw still on the following turn after you expect the Solarian to die. But you've also got to be thinking, like, maybe this is the Apprentice Cyclone turn. It's always on the back of your mind with these hands that that is the possible play.
Evocation. I feel that would be more justified if he had a Mana Giant already. I like the idea of holding out a little bit longer for what's still likely to be a 2-draw cram session, because you expect your Solarian to die, but sometimes it gets additional draws.
This is where things get interesting for Blitzchung, because this is obviously looking to set up to be a Shenvala Apprentice turn, but there was even some consideration, I think, there to just throw out Shenvala, because the rest of his hand synergizes already. Like, he goes for the Jandis next turn, then goes for some kind of Apprentice Giant play on turn 6 instead.
That's very fair.
It's a close one.
But the thing is, they're all, I think, 1 or 2 cards short of the full synergy. If he had more generation with the Apprentice and Shenvala, it works out perfectly, because then you get the generation off Shenvala and the cheapening on the Mana Giants. For this Jandis, I'd have to assume that the Faceless would become the illusion.
And then you just trade it in?
I was thinking maybe even trade it to the 3/5. Oh, but he made the Glavebound on illusion, so he can immediately get a value trade and still stick 4/3. But he does give DawN the information immediately, and the 3/5 can VT the 4/3. So I feel this works out kind of awkwardly no matter which choice Blitzchung took.
And I gotta say, DawN starting with a ping there is a little surprising to me. That was very, very quick to use 2 mana on a hand with some frankly disgusting combos that can come down. Like, he's clearly saving up for his opponent to go in first, I think, and then react to it. But that does have some pretty big punishes in its own right.
I mean, it's just strictly correct to start with your generation play if you have the mana remaining for ping if you need it, right?
Yeah.
But it's a small thing, and now Blitzchung is starting to come back. Not the most spells in the world, but it's just enough for Shenvala, and Mana Giant is getting cheaper and cheaper. Crucially, though, he won't have access to Giant plus Conj next turn just yet.
That's the big deal. And this is what you've been waiting for, DawN. It's time to go. Throw out all of these cards on this turn. You've got to play at lightning speed here to get all this done.
We might not even see Evocation, depending on whether he's also playing the Spell Minion plus Cram Session.
I guess, yeah, Crams... Oh, even Conjurer's Calling here is kind of worth considering just on the 5-drop. You get a pretty big board, and you can still wipe off pretty much everything the opponent does. Oh,
They're all pretty tempting. Like, with DawN's sequencing, you can tell that he was not fishing for Cyclone. He wouldn't have the mana left to do that. He was fishing for exactly Giant, which is the ideal payoff for this type of plan. And he did hit it. good outcomes. All in is DawN here, but still has Evocation Apprentice even if this does manage to somehow get cleaned up from the other side.
Yep, I think very, very clean turn there from DawN, all things considered. I was a little bit skeptical at first, because I was like, do you want to get the Evocation in this turn? But with Apprentice in hand, the Giant drawn, next turn you can just go for an Evocation with Apprentice. Then it's super clean, and he is miles in the lead.
Chung just only 2 spells off of the Cyclone, doesn't get anything of substance. Those would be great if he were in DawN's position on board, where you just need a couple points over the top to deal the lethal, but he needs Ray of Frost or Frost Nova to pair with his Mana Giant.
Now you can probably just hold off on the Apprentice. Conjurer's Calling, Spellwing Ping. Oh.
And I think you leave up the Solarian here just to not give the top deck out of blitzchung.
Yes, yeah, I think I like that. You need to be considering, what goes wrong with these spells that he's generated. Does Flame Strike get any better? Does Blizzard get any better? And so far as I can tell, there aren't any huge breakpoints that you need to be afraid of, right?
I guess he's semi-playing around Raz instead by trading in some of the 2 health minions.
Yeah.
Is it not just strictly better to trade a 1-2 and ping and then have a 2-2 go face? If you're gonna leave him at this board state?
Yes. Slightly strictly better, I agree.
Yes. Small things. We are nitpicky here on Grandmasters. Okay, there's the Ray of Frost.
Huge pickup. Absolutely huge. Giant can come down this turn. Giant double Conjurer's Calling next turn. It's not over.
But it's a big deal that it's just 1 Giant that comes down this turn.
True.
I like this from blitzchung. He's not even using the second Ray of Frost on the other big minion. Trades it off instead because he knows he has to freeze Deathwing again next turn. Very smart.
I am now getting much more tempted to go for the Apprentice line on this turn.
Double Evocation.
Frostbolt, Premium. Oh.
We are not in the business of pinging our own face anymore, I think. Not
No.
enough board space.
I mean, you always play 1 Evocation on this turn, right? Like...
Just 2 mana to work with? He did just commit an Apprentice, so
like
I'm down.
Freeze,
Like,
Secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, additional Frost Bolts, additional Arcane Missiles, that's worth.
Yeah.
Oh,
Additional Mana Giants? Oh. 0 mana, by the way.
Runs out on me.
He can start with Combustion, right? Yeah, I like this. And then you go Arcane Breath, and then all of the missiles go face, and blitzchung is crying.
Gorgeous play. We
I
can only
say
assume...
that because he's not on camera.
Yeah, exactly. He very possibly is crying off cams. We'll have to see.
Okay.
Ooh.
That's a lot of freeze. 8/8. Not able to attack. I can only assume you're freezing Zeraku as well.
You're not dead. Necessarily.
And Walking Fountains, Rom, Tyrion. Oh no, not Natalie! These are some of the worst ones!
Absolutely awful.
That's the nightmare. There are so many insane 8-drop outcomes, and a handful of terrible ones. Big yikes.
Spell damage, Frostbolt, ping, perfect lethal here for DawN. Even his slight strict misplay early, it set up the perfect lethal, so it gets style points for that as well. Ends up taking the win over blitzchung there in a pretty clean game on the tempo mage, I've got to say. I think I liked most of his plays in the early game. It didn't feel too greedy to me. The one thing that was questionable in the early game was when he just snap pinged after the Jandice turn. I think even then, though, it was kind of forgivable. Like, he had it was bad. It wasn't the correct way to go about things. But the overall game plan was you save up this big apprentice turn for when my opponent develops. And that worked out very nicely for him.
Right. I think we are just nitpicking here, and I'm happy if that's the worst thing that we have to say about DawN's play, because this is a player from last season where I think he was just strictly miscounting lethal or going for savage roars when he was pretty far off from it. And it's a stark difference now because in terms of macro game plan, I think DawN has absolutely been on point. He's also been spotting lines that you and I haven't necessarily seen immediately. And overall, I'm really liking it from him. Although he still is down 1-2, and blitzchung, I think overall has a good shot to win the series, even though Mage against Demon Hunter immediately is not a great matchup.
Yep, that's not the best one. The Druid, as we've seen quite consistently today, has been falling pretty flat on its face, though. That is where I think blitzchung has a real avenue to victory, especially with, as we've been saying quite consistently, the really nice playstyle that blitzchung has been employing in that matchup. I think he's just had, or just kind of in general with the Mage, he's had a good understanding of how to play aggressively for tempo. He's got the Conjurer's Calling in his list. He's even got the Firebrands in his list. And we've many times seen blitzchung play the 3-mana 3/4 without any care in the world for how the spell burst works in the matchup. It should be a good one, I think, for blitzchung if he can line up against the Druid.
No!
Looking over at Lorinda's stats on Mali Druid, it really seems like it has been struggling. Oh wait, that's not the matchup we're talking about here. I don't know why that entered my mind. I'm sorry.
No worries.
I'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But up against the Mage, I think this is one of the matchups where Demon Hunter doesn't want to be running Magtheridon. It doesn't seem particularly impactful, especially since it can get frozen. Keep on Blade Dance. It's pretty heads up. I think it's quite important to make sure you have a grasp on the early board.
That's fair. There are a lot of opportunities where I'm like, oh, I'd love to sink this damage face, but I kind of have to clear the board because I don't have Blade Dance. And so, in a roundabout way, even though it's obviously not damage to face with Blade Dance, it allows you to play more aggressively in the long run.
I just really like the idea of pre-equipping a weapon and not swinging into a minion, because even though your opponent will know they're probably setting up for a Blade Dance, they just can't play around it if they don't have weapon removal. Best they can do is go so wide that Blade Dance doesn't clear every single minion, but a lot of the time the big threats get caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, I think already here, DawN had the liberty to just go Hero Power Face and then set up for like Coin Warblades, Hero Power Blade Dance as a possibility in the coming turns. Instead, though, it's the proactive minion development route that he's going for.
Yeah, the use of the coin here is pretty interesting because today blitzchung had a way to remove the Wand Maker on the next turn, which is most likely trade and ping. Then DawN's turn becomes Chaos Strike overcommittal into the lab partner or just hero power it. But up against this specific outcome, he can just spend the turn removing.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because it's specifically a lab partner that's annoying, or I guess specifically a spell damage minion that's annoying, because otherwise I think you could quite happily ignore it and keep pushing face, just like Chaos Strike that turn and push face to set up for the Blade Dance. But because of the threat of more draw with Cram Session, even then, you've seen one. I kind of like the idea of just going face there with Chaos Strike.
I think that now that he has Magtheridon, it's quite possible that he was looking to save Blade Dance for the turn after Magtheridon. And so he's getting rid of the smaller minions now to make sure that Blade Dance has a better shot of dealing with the 1/3s.
I just kind of disagree with the theory of keeping Blade Dance and then trading into minions this much instead of trying to set up. Like, again, it's not to say that you should always be rigid, and if you choose a game plan, you have to stick to it in the mulligan. Obviously, you do have to be more flexible in Hearthstone. But I don't think this instance was one when he did have to deviate from that game plan. I think it was a strong idea he had originally, but he didn't see it through.
Impatient.
That is very fair. And the other big problem he's run into is not having soul fragment shufflers. He's committing to Magtheridon right now because he technically has Blade Dance and Twin Slices to get rid of this on the next turn, plus the actual Twin Slice attack. Very aggressive, but we'll see if it pays off because blitzchung is going wide.
Whoa, and he's also got Mucho Damahe to try and close this one out. I'm definitely eyeing up the fireball here.
I love it. And blitzchung knows that there are 0 soul fragments in the deck right now, so I wonder if you just commit the Firebrand and say you don't have Shatter Shard Mystic anyway.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, isn't it? Like, he does have the powerful play next turn of just straight up Mana Giant, so it wouldn't necessarily be overcommitting, but I guess if you play the Firebrand and they do have the Shard Shatter, you can't play Giant because you need to freeze the Magtheridon instead. So in a way, if he plays the Firebrand and it does get cleared, it locks out the refill with Mana Giant.
True. Yeah, well, there was still ways that Magtheridon gets active there even without a Soul Fragment prior to this turn, like Soul Fragment plus Shatter Shard. So blitzchung was respecting that, and I think fair. And now he runs into the problem of, do I want to commit Mana Giant into this preloaded Magtheridon?
I mean, you can kind of make the read. If your opponent had the clear, they would have gone for it there, surely? That looks worthy enough to me.
Yeah. It could be that DawN is still setting up for a clear this turn, because last turn he went for a weapon equip. So that could mean that they have the clear, but over 2 turns. I like this line from blitzchung of just not committing additional minions. Just send it base. He has Apprentice Evo. Yeah.
Very possibly just lethal next turn. You know what? I'm on board. I like it a lot.
Okay.
Whoa.
That's the activation. But DawN is dying. I feel like he wants to cash in these twin slices.
Yeah, you're... Oh, it's tough, isn't it? You can take 1 turn of potentially just dying on the other side to get a huge amount of heal, or you can take the small amount of heal now because you're afraid of just dying. Oh.
And there's still a decent shot that the Magtheridon gets active as long as the Blade Dance hits 2 of the 1/3s.
It's not clearing it.
Like he's not going for it at all. Okay. Going for the healing instead.
It's tanking 7 on the backswing.
Yeah, it feels weird, right? Because you tank the 7, and yes, you have a guaranteed way of clearing up the next board.
Yeah.
But then you're not pushing lethal yourself?
Right. Of course he has the clear here again, but the thing is, if he's waiting for blitzchung to overcommit into this board, he's going to be waiting a long time. Blitzchung clearly has alternate things to do. He's fireballed the face, he's drawn cards, he's been doing other stuff, all of which is very useful. And now DawN is in the same situation again as last turn, and he just ends up making the same play, but he lost all the healing that he gained.
I think it was a case of missing the opportunity where you can take a risk for 1 turn to potentially win the game later on.
Yeah.
Versus going for the most defensive play that doesn't necessarily let him win overall.
Yeah. I do think, like, again, this is the problem that I have with DawN here, because I don't think this was just like a terrible game. The problem is I was teased with a really cool idea for a game plan, holding onto the Blade Dance at the start, ignoring the minions, going super aggressive with the damage. That's what I wanted to see, but the Blade Dance has sat around in hand the entire game while he's just been trading into minions.
Yeah, I have to admit, I thought the Blade Dance turn was when he charged up the Eldraki, because there was a decent chance of it activating the Magtheridon. Not guaranteed, but even if you partially clear up the board, you take less damage, and you can activate the Magtheridon next turn by clearing up the likely 1 remaining 1/3.
That's a Frostbolt straight up to the face on this turn, which is as close as makes little difference, I think, to lethal here, because there is very little that DawN can do here to stop him from dying.
I just love the 0 hesitation from blitzchung. This is a seasoned Generation Mage player.
Those 3 cards on the right doing absolutely nothing. You can unlock the skull.
Yeah, I mean, even if you hit the dream outcome with Blade Dance Lapidary, there's still too much damage on board.
Can Skull get anything to win you the game? I'm not seeing it.
Nope. He used up the big board clear with the Magtheridon, and to be fair, he needed to. blitzchung did not take the bait of overcommitting into it. But I do think DawN missed a window to be aggressive on his end.
Yeah, I think so for sure. blitzchung gave him no wiggle room whatsoever, though. This was, I think, a very difficult game to win at all on the Demon Hunter's side because blitzchung was just playing so clean at every point with this game. But in the end, it's not enough.
In the series overall, valiant effort from DawN, but blitzchung takes that and he makes it look easy. Ever since that first game up against the Druid, he was giving DawN no wiggle room, and I think blitzchung took nearly every opportunity to optimize the play, and as the lineups matched up against each other, I think blitzchung absolutely had the advantage, and that's how it panned out.
Indeed. I'm just starting to think that blitzchung, even with us singing his praises, still doesn't get quite enough credit as to how he takes these tempo matchups. Like, we always talk about Surrender going for the game plan of bringing the good decks and just playing them better than his opponents, which obviously is, for the most part, absolutely true. But I think blitzchung's, with these tempo decks, it's just so surgical. I just think he breaks it down so cleanly,